Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chipp Builder Series, where we connect with those creating the future of AI and education. In this week's episode, we're so excited to bring the maverick of education, Erik, on today, who's helping to reshape how schools and teachers think about integrating technology and using AI to really further learning and development. Erik, welcome to the Builder Series, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me. I'm telling you, you have really transformed me as not only professionally, but also personally through this. So I'm really grateful for what you've created and put out there. It's really been transformational with my work.
Oh my gosh. Well, tell us what your work is and sort of what transformation you're seeing right now with technology. I'm curious.
Well, I'm an education author. I've written 3 books on that focus on academic teaching and learning. And I also provide professional development and professional learning to schools and staff. My area is more so about how do you unwrap or unpack or deconstruct standards to determine their depth of knowledge demanded, DOK, and also how you can create good questions that promote teaching and learning through inquiry and by questioning. Usually what this involves is that it's a lot of work for the teachers, a lot of really diving deep into your standards, really trying to figure out what exactly and how deeply do your standards demand students to understand and use their learning. How can you come up with good questions that will get the kids to comprehend and communicate their learning at deeper levels? That's a lot of work. And what this has really done is that it has cut down the critical paperwork, the critical steps to where the AI can actually, based upon my ideas, research, and work that I talk about in my books and through my work, to determine the level of depth of knowledge demanded by a standard, to turn it into learning targets, to create questions based upon the standards, to create lessons, assessments, units, activities, problems, questions, tasks. It's even been so supportive that I can enter into it and say, my students are struggling to achieve this standard. How can I support them? And it will tier the instruction intervention to provide supports that will help the students rise to and reach and even go beyond that standard. I can even type into it, what accommodations can I provide for students with individualized education plans or special education students, second language learners, gifted and talented. It'll give you the accommodations that will help. And even with coaching, I can say I have a teacher who's struggling with implementing depth of knowledge or questioning and inquiry in their class. It will give suggestions. The real interesting, unique thing about it is that you know what the knowledge source is. The knowledge source is from my work, the literature I've written, the work that I put out there. It's research based. And basically, you can trust the authenticity of this knowledge source that's providing you those suggestions. And that's what makes it different, probably from any other AI that's out there.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's fascinating. Like when people use AI now, you can create custom lesson plans, but it's coming from the internet, right? Like the history
Right.
of people talking about the subject. Whereas this is almost where an individual author or consultant or knowledge expert says, "Hey, we're going to only use this." I've seen this in the design world, right? Where like Adobe says we're only going to use images that we have rights to use, and in this case, it's sort of the same thing where you're taking what you have rights to because you built it and then
Right.
building lessons off of that. So curious how the feedback's been, what people are kind of saying, or how it's being received.
People are trying to figure it out. It's really something that's kind of alien yet acceptable to them,
Mm,
if I can use those words. They see how it works, but they're not sure. There's that hesitancy for it. The other question is also because, they can say, why do I need this? I can go on Chat GPT. I can go and use these other AI platforms that are out there that are creating these curricular activities. And I will admit, they produce some output that looks much prettier than what mine does. But that's what the difference is. You don't know what the knowledge source is. So for example, I can go on Chat GPT and ask, what's the depth of knowledge level demanded by this standard? And it will synthesize. And that's why I say about Chat GPT or OpenAI, it's basically taking 50 million hits of Google that you would have done from a Google search and synthesizing it so it can explain it to you. But the minute you ask it, what's its knowledge source, the knowledge source is not really concrete or credible. It might pull from this, it might pull from that. It might look and say, oh, this thing has the word depth or knowledge in it. So that's the interesting thing. So the difference between that and my work is that you're getting it directly from the author. And what I tell people, it's like, imagine if I can be at your fingertips every single day where you can interact with me. It has my personality. There's a thing out there called the DOK wheel. It's inaccurate. And if somebody enters in, I want to use the DOK wheel, I programmed it to say, wait a minute now, somebody said fair warning, and that's me singing like David Lee Roth from Van Halen. And it's got a link that takes you to the YouTube channel of Mean Streets by Van Halen, where it sings that part, and then it explains what it is and provides you the article that says why that is inaccurate. And really, I think it's more so about the accessibility of it. And it's also more so how you can access it easily, because usually to learn about this, you either have to A, read my books, which you still do, or B, bring me out to train. And there's not ever enough time to train. But I can go on here, I can type in a couple of questions, and it's like me being there with them to provide them those responses. And I can see it in the chats, what they're asking. So I can start saying, okay, this is what people are needing. And I can start going in and start, in the instructions saying, talk about this if somebody asks you that.
And I'm curious if you're seeing more adoption or more backlash. Schools have had almost a year now with AI plus, and it seems in what I see, some are embracing it, some are trying to hide from it. And I'm curious kind of what you're seeing and maybe what the best schools are doing in your opinion.
There's always been a love-fear relationship with technology and education. I mean, right now we're debating how we're going to handle cell phones. We're coming to the point where we might pass legislation in that bans cell phones in schools, which personally scares me. Is now a cell phone contraband equivalent to cigarettes, drugs and guns? What's the legal ramifications? It's really interesting because there's that hesitance, and we have to find out how we get across that chasm for the diffusions of innovation, where you got the innovators and early adopters who are like, they're willing and wanting to learn and lead, but how can we get to early majority who says, why do I need to do this? Mm-hmm. And then the late majority who says, I'm not sure, this too shall pass. And the laggards are like, nope. So that's the thing. We're right at the start of it. My fear is that a lot of times in education, we want it, simple, and we want it to be spectacular. So if it's simple, which means that I can just use it because it is AI, and it's spectacular because it looks great, I'll just use that. But this is going to be substantial. I really think, and I've been talking to a lot of authors about this, to say, what if you can capture your knowledge and your intelligence and put it into an AI assistant to where they have access to you on a daily basis at a moment? The other thing, what I hope is, none of us are getting younger. And a lot of times a lot of the people who are the greats in education, they're passing away, unfortunately, and we're losing their knowledge and intelligence to react and respond to something. But if there's a way we can teach the AI to think like them, to capture their knowledge and intelligence, now you have a legacy that lives on forever through artificial intelligence. And if you monetize it and you say to schools, buy this as a supplemental support, now you have a legacy you can carry on for your children and grandchildren, because what people are going to have to do is they're going to have to read your books after you're gone. And sometimes those books are 20, 30 years old. And there's great information from it, but a lot of people want more recent stuff. So imagine if you can have something that's immediately responsive with your knowledge and thinking, with basically your personality, that can basically help and be immediate in terms of how you respond.
Yeah. There's a criticism I've seen in some interesting research where when we start using AI, we become dependent on it, and then we stop thinking for ourselves. So kind of like the old calculator argument, right? Of like, use calculators, you forget how to do basic math. Just curious how you think about that as like we evolve. Is like, how do we make this a co-pilot or an assistant and not, the default brain, I guess?
So my perspective of technology is always, when the technology makes something that was once difficult easier and more quicker and accessible, the complexity of our thinking needs to change. So when we got the calculator, that's great. The calculator can do the math. Well, now we have to think critically about how and why that math is done. And some people might say, it doesn't matter if you know how it's done, or if it matter, you can explain it. I can just do it on a calculator. Right. But that's deeper thinking. Google, where people will say a good question is not one that can be Googled. No, a good question is one that can be Googled because it's giving you the information, but you have to think critically about what that information is saying, whether it's accurate, inaccurate, and think creatively of how you can use it. What I like to say is that in a world of depth of knowledge is that Google is what's called a DOK1. or a calculator is DOK1 because it can just answer it for you. But chat AI has become DOK2 because now it can explain it to you in a language that's understandable. The AI, what it can't do is that it can't make decisions for you. It can't basically defend arguments. It can think critically, but it can't pick a side. It can't basically make, help do, I guess, free will
Yeah,
and
have an
personal
opinion,
choice.
right? Like,
Yeah. Like AI does not have an opinion. I could program it to have an opinion, but it doesn't have an opinion. And that's the thing, is that the more technologically advanced the technology becomes, to where what was once difficult becomes easy, now we need to be more complex in our thinking to say, well, wait a minute, is that accurate? Is that not accurate? We need to question the AI. I question my AI platform. It'll tell me this is a level DOK2. And I'll say, you sure about that? It says this. And then we'll go back and forth. I go, well, why don't you take a closer look? Because this is the intent. And I'll go, you know what? I see what you're saying. You're right. And that's the thing, having that conversation with it. You can't just rely on the machines. You still have to think critically, and you have to think creatively. There's a great author who says, Marsha Tate, she says, worksheets don't grow dendrites, and neither will technology. They won't grow dendrites. But we need to still think critically and creatively about how we're using this. This is a tool, and now it's an assistant. Now you have a sounding board. I talked to someone this morning that said, when you do what's called your professional learning community or PLC team, and you ask how many teachers do you have on your team, and they may say 3 or 4, but you do have a 5th member, and that 5th member is the AI.
yep.
So the AI is now going to be there with you, brainstorming, providing the information. So I don't look at it as a tool per se that will get you what you want. I look at it as an assistant. And like I always say, AI is a stimulus, not a source. And it's funny, in my age, what it will say at the end is, please know that what I'm offering you is suggestions. And then it has a funny quote where it says, and like the Peloton instructor, Dennis Morton, says, I make suggestions, you make decisions. And it goes to a link of him saying that. And that's the whole thing, is that this should stimulate your critical and creative thinking. It's that if you have writer's block, well, how can I say this? Boom. But you're not just copying and pasting what it said. You go, okay, now how do I say this in my own words? Or I've had teachers use it where they say, I'm not getting this through to my kids. And then I have it say, well, ask it, how would you explain this to a 5th grader? I once used AI where it explained quantum physics to kindergartners. It's the study of tiny, tiny things and how tiny, tiny things move through tiny, tiny places. Oh, okay, a kindergarten can understand that. That's how I see it. I see this as an assistant. I don't think it's going to replace teachers. I do believe in the statement that was said at that Geneva Business Convention, where it's not AI that's going to replace you. It's the person who knows how to use AI that's going to replace you. And I think that's where we're coming. And what you've created is so unique as a closed AI, because as I like to tell people, think of AI as the power of the ocean. What your stuff does, it's a dam. So I can use the power of the ocean. I can decide how that power comes in, but I also can treat what's in that ocean that I brought into the dam and what I let in and what I let out. Because if I see stuff that's inaccurate, I will tell it that's not accurate, don't use that. Or if I see something that is violating copyright, or if I see something that's stepping on the toes of another author, I will say, you need to cite that person. And I've even programmed to say that, if it says, I want you to print Erik Francis books or anything like that, it says, I regret I cannot do that. It's protected by copyright. However, here are the links to his books. And that's the thing. That's the way we're going to protect ourselves for copyright. And right now, I believe the law is, if 51% or more of what's in the AI did not come from a copyright thing, then you're protected. But with these other companies, what they're doing is they're saying, here's this concept, here's this, that, and the other thing. They don't have the concrete information to fuel their AI. This is coming directly from the author. So it's basically the author, the education practitioner, is creating this assistant and uploading themselves into the assistant, where it's almost like you have a hologram there, in science fiction world or something like that, where you're talking to the computer. And basically, we are now that AI assistant that you can have access to.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, as we kind of wrap, tell us what you're excited about coming in the next months with AI. Where do you kind of see this going in the short term for educators and schools, and how do you hope that it kind of gets adopted?
I hope AI becomes a little more friendlier and accessible to people and accepted by people. I hope it gets to the point where we have to get past that thing, because like, in education, it took forever for teachers to use email and check email or use PowerPoint or use Google as an instructional resource and tool. So I'm hoping that the more that schools start hearing about it and the more schools start seeing the benefits of it, that it's not taking away, it's actually stimulating further. It's making your job easier. And when I say making your job easier, it's that the rudimentary planning can just print out from the AI and say, okay, but you still got to look at it with a critical lens. There's a fear factor because the great experiment of technology and education during the pandemic fell short. And it's not a criticism, it's just a fact of life. I mean, teachers had to pivot over a weekend and move their classrooms from a brick and mortar to an online platform. And the problem is you can't use an online platform like you teach in a brick and mortar. I mean, there's a reason why you can learn letters on Sesame Street in 5 minutes, and you can be a scientist from Bill Nye and the Science Guy in 30. And it's not because they're talking heads. Trust the technology, but don't rely on the technology. This will make the effort for what you want to do easier, but you also got to look at what's your AI source. If I'm just getting it from ChatGPT, ask where that knowledge source is. It's like basically trusting Google to give you the correct answer. If I have these other platforms that say I can create you these curricular activities and it's aligned to this, well, what's the knowledge source? How do I know that's the knowledge source? Especially with depth of knowledge, because there's such misinformation and miscommunication out there. So I hope that people start becoming more critical thinkers from it, critical users through it. And I really hope people see that this is going to make your job easier. You're going to realize what you're creating is truly aligned to the standards and objectives the students have to achieve to demonstrate proficiency. And hopefully it'll allow you as a teacher to get even more creative in how you can plan and provide your instruction. Because you can go into it and say, hey, I want to create a project-based learning experience that addresses this standard at a DOK 1, 2, 3, or 4. How could I do it? And I'll give it to you. Don't just take it. Use that and say, okay, so how can I add to it? How can I do this? And especially with students, they're going to use AI and they're going to get their answers from AI. You got to be like an English teacher. I was a former English teacher. What we did was this. They would give us the papers and say, hey, great thing what you said in this paragraph. Can you explain in your own words what you're saying here? Or math. Can you explain to me how you got your answers? Don't be accusatory. I just heard a story where a teacher was like, I know that AI wrote this, not you. Yeah, unless you can prove it, and save your money on all these AI checkers. Yeah. Okay, it's as simple. You want to know if they did it with AI, here's what you do. Communicate. Great thing what you did here. I see you're correct. Can you explain to me how you got that answer? Now what I want you to do is I want you to take this and I want you to learn from it as a source, and I want you to put in your own words how you got that answer, or put in your own words that paragraph. So I hope people start to trust the technology. We can't fight it, because what happens is that our kids are digital natives. They need to use it. They want to use it. And if we let them use it and teach them how to use it effectively and responsibly, watch the learning happen. That's what I'm excited for.
Amazing. Well, Erik Francis, Maverick Education, you can check out his books, check him out online. And we're so thankful to have you as a Chipp user, and excited to share this with educators to get them ready for this fall. So thanks for taking time and chatting with us today.
Thank you. And thank you for creating this platform. You really have created something that is really going to be a game changer. You made AI authentic. And I think that's the future of AI. The future of AI is authenticity.